Hey folks, this is Dr. B from Steps to the Future. Little bit late today, but we were having some technical difficulties, but they're all straightened out now. So let me tell you a little bit about why I kind of decided I wanted to do this topic. So as you join in, please make sure you like and share this, and we hope that you like it. So what happened was one of my colleagues had posted a question. And that question really intrigued me because then I said, oh, I need to think about this. So the question was, and you see it scrolling along the bottom of the screen, what grade were you in when you had your first Black male teacher? So it was really eye-opening when I posted this and people started answering. So again, we're a little late, but thank you so much for joining in. Folks that are joining in, please make sure you like and share this so that so other people can join in the conversation. I am really thrilled tonight because when I decided I wanted to use this topic, I said, there's someone I would love to have co-host this with me. And it's one of my colleagues that I had the pleasure of working with for a number of years at the East Providence School District in Rhode Island. And he's here with us this evening. And I am like thrilled beyond words to have Richard Martin here with us. So Richard is a recently retired social studies teacher. So this is his first summer where he's not going back to school in the fall. So Richard, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I could walk me through the technical difficulties. But the one thing I want to say though is that I am retired, but I'm going to be going back and teaching my two electives, Africana 200, which is an EEP, early enrollment for college credit, and the traditional, as I call it, the traditional African American history. So I'm 3/5 retired, not 5/5 retired.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that. Oh man, those lucky kids, lucky kids.
It's perfect.
So thank you so much. So actually we have a couple of comments. So Sherry Simmons, who is a librarian that I've had the opportunity to work with. Sherry said the first time that she was in the second grade when she had a Black male teacher. And she said, congratulations, Mr. Martin, on your returning to the classroom.
Well,
so thank you, Sherry, so much for joining in. And other folks that are in there, make sure you throw up some emojis for us and also questions, comments as we go along. So I really appreciate if people would participate in the conversation because that's what we're all about here tonight. So Richard, actually one of my colleagues had this question up, and I thought, I said, oh, when did I have a Black male teacher? And it wasn't until I thought it was my junior year, but it might have been my senior year. So it was either my junior year or senior year of high school, and it was a history teacher, Mr. Dowd. And I said, oh, okay. So when I put this out there, the responses range from never, from people who have gone, all the way through graduate programs to a terminal degree, to some people who said as early as kindergarten. So it was all in between. So the reason why I wanted to have you on it as a co-host is because one of the things that always struck me when I was still teaching at East Providence High School was in at Martin with you, because we worked in both schools, was the love that the kids had for you. It was, okay, so let me tell this story. So so for people who aren't familiar with our high school, teachers had what we call duty periods. So one of my duties was corridor duty, and it was on the second floor corridor. And a lot of times I was stationed in the history wing, and my time was around the time when Richard would be teaching. And I used to love to sit outside his classroom and hear how he interacted with the students. I mean, he would come in the classroom and he always said, whether it was, good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and they always responded back, good evening, good afternoon or good morning, Mr. Martin. And it was just so cool. But what really, really struck me, Richard, is there was one time, there was a young man who spent a lot of time in 119. So for people who aren't familiar, 119 was where students would be sent when they were kicked out of class.
Yeah.
And I remember this guy had, I think it was African American history class that he was in. And I remember saying to him, because I knew, he could be a behavior problem. And I said, so how come when you're in Mr. Martin's class, you don't act up? And he said, because I respect him too much and I don't want to let him down. That stayed with me all those years, because that's the type of influence that you have on students. And that's why I thought it was so important to have this conversation about the importance of having a Black male teacher. So I've been doing a lot of rambling off at the mouth. So tell me, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, to that story, I always started, first day of school, I said to them, every single day, I'm going to greet you with good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If it's morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's afternoon. We're going to practice that now. Respond after me. So for me, that was a way to give them respect from the very first day of school. And it became a ritual and routine, because I always liked it when teachers would say, hello, how are you doing? Rather than open your book to page 35. So that kind of became my thing. I think that, and getting back to the question of the evening, and Black male teachers, Black teachers in general, is I didn't have a Black teacher until my master's program at Rhode Island College. Okay.
Wow.
So never. Now, there were Black teachers at East Providence High School, but I never, I didn't take the class.
Okay.
And so here's how you know your mother loves you. When I came home and said that Black history is being offered, she said, well, how come you're not going to take it? And I said, arguably the stupidest thing I've said in the whole of my life. What if I fail? And she kind of looked at me and just kind of had this look in her eyes like, one day you'll see, one day you'll learn. And she did, and never said anything about it. So when I taught the class, she was so excited. Now back to the evening, the question of the evening. It's so important because clearly kids need to see somebody who looks like them. That's the first thing. Students need to see somebody who looks like them. And then if the teacher doesn't look like the student, with that kind of diversity, it's just someone else in the quilt of experiences they'll have that they can say, oh, I've gotten this perspective. One of the most exciting things for me was when I taught African American history was I was always tell my white students, you're going to be able to go places I can't go and hear things that won't be said in front of me. But hopefully with this information I'm giving you, you can say, no, you know what? This is the story, or this is the real situation, or this is, so it was really important for them. And in terms of students of color, to see somebody, even if they don't want to become a teacher, it opens up the door of possibility, right? And I always tell stories. I'm a storyteller. I always tell my kids, I'm just like you, only 45 years later. And they freak 45, well, that's what happens, do the math. But I would always tell them I'm you. I sat in the same chair. I looked at the same clock. I thought about, we were on double sessions. We got out at 12:30. We're going to go play basketball, ride our bikes, do whatever it is. But I'm just like you. And if I can do this, you can do this, whether it's teaching or anything else. So there's a connection between the student and the teacher. That's crucial.
Right. I so agree with you, especially where you mentioned about having a Black teacher in front of students. It's not just for the Black students, it's for the white students also.
Absolutely. Because
it's so important that people of all races see everybody in all types of fields, all types of careers.
Yeah.
I remember when I started at East Providence, in the East Providence School District, and I've told people this story before. I had applied for East Providence. I had applied for a teaching position at East Providence when I first graduated from college, and didn't get a job that year. So I was working for social services in Rhode Island for a year, and then someone who was on the Human Relations Commission for East Providence that played basketball with my husband asked him if I had a teaching job yet. And he said, no, she doesn't. He goes, well, tell her to apply to East Providence because we're thinking about a lawsuit or some legal action because the lack of Black teachers at the high school.
Yes.
So I said, okay,
yes,
let me apply. Now, here's the difference from the one year to the next.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, there was a space on the application where you could put a little wallet-sized photo. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't I didn't do that the first year.
Mm-hmm.
The second year I did. Within less than 2 weeks, I had an interview.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Had an interview, was told I most likely would be hired. And I remember the question I asked. I said, so, they always ask you at the end of the interview, do you
Yeah.
have any questions? And I said, yeah. I said, what's different from my application this year than last year? I said, because it's the same transcript,
Good question.
the same teaching certificate.
Mm-hmm.
What's different? And no one could really answer that. But I remember I knew what the difference was. I had put that picture on the
Yes,
application.
Yes, you did.
And started at East Providence High School first
Mm-hmm.
off, and was the only Black female teacher in the classroom.
Oh, yes.
So this was before you started at the high school. So at that time, it was me in social studies and Billy Fonts in English.
Right.
And out of a staff of about, what did we have? Maybe about 170 teachers when you took everyone into account.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the two of us for the longest time. And then, a couple of other positions. There was never an overwhelming number of us.
No.
I mean, I think you could always count us on one hand.
There still is.
Yeah. Which is so sad.
And now that I've retired, I've damaged our percentages because it's still not that many. It's still on one hand, maybe with a couple of fingers missing.
Wow.
Yeah,
so we have a comment from Jay. So Jay is one of my regulars. I love her to death because she's always here, and she has two children, and she's always trying to do the best thing for them. So she's saying that her son plans to teach middle school science and social studies for this reason, among others. He said children who look like him need to know that Black students like science and can excel in it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember I wanted to be an astronaut because when I was a kid, they had the Mercury and the Apollo missions, and I had all the models, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And something must have happened internally because I didn't see Black astronauts. So at some point, I must have believed that I couldn't be an astronaut because I didn't see any Black astronauts. And so the fact that I saw Black teachers in East Providence High School but didn't have them, it kind of allowed me to say, hey, maybe I could do this. I didn't want to, my parents had a tire business, and I remember vividly saying after working during the summers and during our college breaks that I didn't want to get my hands dirty. So I wanted to figure out something where I was a bit of a class clown. How could I use those skills? How can I not get my hands dirty? And how could I live forever? And so one way that as teachers we live forever is, I tell my students all the time, we get into their heads like their favorite pop song, said or done, and when you least expect it, will pop up. And I can't tell you how many students I've had who have said, I remember when you said this, I remember when you said this. You see them in the community, especially if you live in the community, and they say those things. How's school going now? And I'd love to have your class now with everything that's going on. So it was perfect, but good for that young person who wants to be a teacher and teach science, because it's important for especially middle schoolers to see someone who looks like them. Absolutely.
Yes. I agree with that so much. Middle school is crucial. So Jay, thank your son so much for taking up that mantle and running with it, because I had my first Black teacher when I was in middle school. It was my 7th grade English teacher. And even before that, I knew that education was going to be my pathway, but seeing Miss Judith Smith, I still remember her name, Miss Judith Smith, in that 7th grade class at Gilbert Stewart School in Providence, Rhode Island, was amazing. She was like a goddess to me, because here was someone in front of the classroom doing what I dreamed of doing. And all the, years up until then, that was the first time I saw someone that looked like me at the front of the classroom. Now, I saw people in the school who might have been working in the office or might have been on the, maintenance staff or something like that, or working in the cafeteria, but she was in front of the classroom. She was the teacher. And I remember how excited I was that year when I found
Mhm.
out, that's who we had for school. So we have another comment here from Jeffrey. Hey, Jeffrey, how are you doing? This was, a former student, and had his brother Ralph also. Ralph Wright. Yeah, so a lot of our kids on here. So Jeff is saying he sees the impact his presence has working in a school each day. It makes a difference for students and families in the communities. Now, Jeff, you at CCRI at the community college? I think that's where I remembered you working. Um, so again, seeing that impact, it's so important.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how I don't know. I guess I was just always such a big fan of yours, Richard. I just, like I said, love the way the kids reacted to you. Love the way you made history come alive for the kids through your storytelling. I'm telling you, I used to be I used to be so glad when I had Cara to duty and I could sit outside your room because I would learn so much. I would sit there and say, "Wow, I wish I had a teacher like him when I was in school," because you were just so good at what you do. And so I'm glad that you're still going to be going back and teaching
yeah,
a couple of classes because that's going to be fantastic. So,
yeah.
folks, if you have questions or comments, make sure you throw them in there. So, Richard, go ahead.
Couple things I like to say. My wife has the same experience that you had going to a school in Providence where she had a woman teacher, a female teacher. I believe it was in middle school, and she still remembers her name. And I'm sure, just like the teacher that you're talking about, she looked a million because, again, I heard this: you have to be twice as good to be equal for my parents, especially my mom, all the time. So much so that I'd mouth the words, but not so she could see me because she knew just where your lips were if you were rolling your eyes or sucking your teeth or imitating her. And so, the presentation is the totality of the package is so important. And I'm sure that teacher that you had looked a million, she moved a million, she had
Yes, you
confidence,
did.
whether or not it was the outside shell of confidence, but inside we all have those little anxieties or that nervousness. But when she put it together in that classroom, that was her world. And you knew when you walked into her world that there was no plan. There was no plan. And she shared herself. And the other thing I wanted to say is that it's not just being in a classroom, it's being in the building. Because
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've had students or kids who went to the high school who I didn't have who said, I wish I had had you because I heard that you were really good. So kids are recording in their heads, whether you're in their room, whether you're their teacher or not, just the way you carry yourself in the hallway. You say hello to students, you might compliment them. It's like there's a special day. We used to have bow tie Thursday. And a kid would wear a bow tie and you'd say, whoa, that's pretty outstanding, huh? I'm glad I put my bow tie on today. Or something like that self-depreciating thing that just makes them feel really good.
That is so, so true. I remember those bow ties. It's so funny. And I remember how, kids would come in and they would wear them. And I used to be saying, oh, I said, look at this. But what your mom said, and I do remember Miss Smith always being so fashionable and so well put together out there and
Mhm.
just made me want to I just wanted to be like her. One of the things I remember about her, during, I think, right at the end of that school year, she was going to be getting married, and she actually invited the class to come to her wedding.
So cool.
And so about 5 of us decided, because I remember I was with a group of 5, and we decided we were going to go.
Mhm.
And it was a military wedding. And to do this, I wish I remembered what her married name was, because I would love to see if she was still around in Rhode Island. But I
Yeah.
remember thinking, oh my God, this teacher who I adored invited us to her wedding,
How
and it was
cool
a
is that?
military wedding, and it was just so cool. And that just like stuck with me like forever.
Yeah, and that's
Forever.
the power of teaching. And she
Yeah.
invited you to her wedding, so it went beyond the classroom.
Yes.
This
Yes.
connection she's a human being, and when
Yeah.
she humanized herself in your eyes, it just made you it's made you understand the possibilities of what you could do. Because people did
Right.
the same thing with you. Because you came in there, high fashion, no joking, and people respected you, not just the students, but the staff as well, because you have that to contend with too. Because especially when
Yes.
you're the only one, you bear the burden of being the focal point for the entire race.
Right.
And one of the things that makes me nervous with what I see happening is the clientele getting more diverse and the teaching force getting less diverse. Those people who are in positions who are black and brown in those positions, whenever there's a racial issue, you now become the person who's the arbiter of justice or representing that racial perspective, when initially you're just trying to learn how to teach.
Exactly.
And so by putting that extra burden on people, I think it's incredibly unfair. And so everybody needs to do their part, to try to teach some type of racial justice or social justice, so that these people don't become, I've got a problem with a black student, I have to go to Mr. Martin. I'm going to have to go to Mrs. Wilkerson because I don't know what to do. Well, find out what to do.
Exactly.
Find out what to do. That's not my job. Now, many of the times we take those responsibilities on because we feel that's part of our duty as well. But as you know, if you have all this other stuff coming at you and trying to teach your schedule and keep yourself healthy and mentally balanced, it's tough. It's really hard.
It is. And I remember in what you said about our presence is also felt outside of the classroom. So I can remember, having corridor duty or being in the cafeteria, what have you, feeling like, if you saw something going on, making sure that you stepped in, especially if it was students of color, because we knew what the deal was. We knew the types of conversations that took place in the teacher's room.
Absolutely.
So I felt it was my duty, my responsibility as a Black woman to talk to these students, to have them understand what was being said and how they were being viewed and how they may have been playing into somebody's stereotype of who they were, when I know that wasn't who they were. And sometimes the behaviors were cultural behaviors that people didn't understand because they had never been around anyone. So they just assumed that somebody was acting out. No, they're not.
And you knew that immediately without even sensing. You just knew. You made a cultural connection with those students because you could. I remember I went to visit a friend who teaches ESL. She teaches L's. So I went down to visit and said hello, and I forgot how we got on the conversation, but we got on the conversation about discipline. And it was the same thing. I just told the stories about a couple of examples about how I was raised. And like I said before, my mom knew exactly where my lips were when I sucked my teeth or rolled my eyes. And about 6 or 7 kids immediately started to smile because they knew exactly what I was talking about. And then when class was over, she said to me, that what you did, that connection you made in 5 minutes, I couldn't do at all. And why not? And she said, because you just instinctively knew and understood their culture, because a lot of them were nodding their heads because they had the same experience.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
It is. So we have a question here from Jeffrey. He says, how do we both navigate conversations with our peers?
Well, I'll start. You know what? You just go forward.
Yes.
You just go forward. You can't. I was lucky that I developed early on a persona of this Mr. Martin character, who's me now, but when I first started, wasn't. And so that character, took no stuff, went straight ahead, and just told people in a way that wasn't demeaning or anything that this is what it's about. And so I was able to never shy away from a conversation, but I just talked to them and just gave them some scenarios. Well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And never felt defensive. And plus we had some pretty good people working with us.
We did. I had a couple of experiences where I had to have one of those courageous conversations or say something, I had to, take a stand. I can remember very clearly one time, and I don't know if you were in the same house with me at this time. I was in house C then.
Okay.
And you might have been, I'm not sure, but it was at lunchtime. And you know how when we're at Martin Middle School where we're in houses. So everybody eats lunch together at the same time. We're on the same schedule. And I do remember one time a colleague saying, we were talking about vacations, visiting places. And I remember a colleague saying, well, I, for the life of me, wouldn't want to visit Africa. Who wants to see people swinging through trees and living in huts?
Oh my
And I
God.
and I remember sitting
Oh
there
my
saying
God.
to myself, like, "I just wanna eat lunch. I
Yes.
just
Yeah.
wanna eat lunch." But Billy Flanagan,
Mm-hmm.
who
Yep.
Billy and I started the same year,
Yep.
I looked at Billy and Billy looked at me and he said, "You need to say something." And so we're having this side conversation and I said, "Billy, I just wanna eat my lunch. I don't feel like doing." He said, "You need to say something." So I remember I said, well, I, for one, would love to go visit Africa, and I start talking about all of these different inventions and the
Mhm.
kingdoms of Africa and what have you. To her credit, she turned red, but that didn't stop future things. I mean,
Right.
this person still said things. What one of the things I remember, this is one of the things that struck me when in response to Jeffrey's questions.
Hmm.
It wasn't even so much what navigating with peers because that was interesting.
Mm.
But it was other Black students who saw so few of us in the school.
Yes.
So I remember one time the parent of one of my Black students, I saw her out somewhere. It might have been like, Walmart or Stop and
Mhm.
Shop or somewhere. And
Mhm.
she said to me, my daughter is so worried about you. And I said, worried about me? I'm like, why? She's concerned about who you have to talk to because there aren't any other Black female teachers in the school.
Wow.
So this
Wow.
kid was looking at the landscape, looking at the environment of our high school,
Yes.
and was feeling something for me
Yeah.
because she saw that the place I was. So I remember having a conversation with her and talking about how you learn to have a foot in two worlds.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We talked about code switching. We talked about a lot that day, but my goal was to, have her understand that this is something you learn how to do because I knew that as a Black educator in Rhode Island, there would be a lot of times that I would be a minority of one.
Absolutely.
And you have to
Absolutely.
figure out how to live with that and
Absolutely.
how to
Absolutely.
be.
And I think another thing that's important is we talk about intersectionality now a lot.
Yes.
And I think a lot of things that, and this is a generalization, but there's a lot of things that Black women teachers have to
Mm,
go through that I personally haven't necessarily had to go through, right? Because you've got being a woman, which you have to go through anyway, and then being a Black woman on top of that, there are things that people may say to you that they wouldn't say to me. They
right.
wouldn't say to me because I'm a man. They wouldn't say to me because I'm a Black man. I'm a big Black man. And so a lot of times they wouldn't say those things to me, but they'd say those things to you or other women of color because they think it's easier or it will slide or maybe you won't say anything. But you and other women have quickly put them on notice that that's not the case. That is not the case. And fortunately, my wife and I have raised a daughter who I wanted her to teach desperately. But when about 10 years ago, when it started to be bad, when we used to get criticized for everything, I
Yes.
told her, honey, I just don't, I'd rather you not teach. And she went to Northeastern, and during her gap year, she did 2 semesters in elementary school. So we went up to go and visit her in a Boston suburb. And it was an elementary school. And I remember seeing her, and I'm almost in tears. It was wonderful. And we're leaving, and she's walking with us, and these little kids, it's a Friday afternoon, and they're walking out, and they're saying, bye, Miss Martin, bye, Miss Martin. And I want to cry because she would have been great. But
Mm,
who wants to go into a profession where they cut your benefits, they cut your pay, and they
yeah,
put more things on your plate and denigrate you to society at large. And then you
exactly.
worry about how do we attract teachers and teachers of color? And if you want
Exactly.
the best and brightest, then you've got to pay them. And so for many of our children, they've got 50, 60, 70, 80, $90,000 in debt, 100, 120. They need a job that's going to pay them 6 months after they graduate because that's when they start knocking on the door for those tuition, for those college payments back. And they can't afford to go into teaching,
Right.
which is tragic to me.
It is. It is a tragedy. It's crazy. It's really crazy. So we have a comment here from Sherry. Thank you, Sherry,
Thank you.
that she's thankful that, kids have had teachers like us. Sherry, it's so funny. I knew, like I said, for the longest time, I think since I was like in 6th grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And being an educator still, you know, 40 Ooh, 40. Whew, that's
Big
scary.
number.
40,
That's how many years later in the classroom.
that's scary.
Mathematics
40
is
something
scary.
years later. Um, it's still the job. It's still the career I would take again and again and again. We've got students on here like Jeff. Jeff is a former student. His brother was a former student of mine. Um, and I'm still connected with so many students that I had in high school. Actually, one of my students, was Claudine Varela. It's now Claudine Miles. She was a guest on and talking about her role being an educator and being an administrator in school. So knowing that you have those connections with students years later, and it was because of how you treated them, because it's not about the teaching. The teaching counts, but the first thing is the relationship that you have with
Absolutely.
students.
Absolutely.
And it's relationships that you build with all of your students, not just, it's important that Black and white students have that relationship with you. I'll never forget one of my students when I was in middle school came up to me during after class one day, because we were scheduled for an open house that night. And she came up to me and she said, "Miss Wilkerson, I have to tell you something." And I'm like, "What is it?" And she said, and this was a white student. She said, "My father doesn't like Black people, and he's coming to the open house. Um, so I just wanted to let you know." So she was afraid he was going to say something to me
Is that amazing?
because he had said things at home.
Sure. Sure.
So when he came in, because the teachers, the students, excuse me, parents come into the classroom and meet the
Mhm.
teacher, and we
Mhm.
do a brief overview of our class. He didn't say anything, and he didn't give off any vibes, but I remember thinking how nervous this young girl was. So I said,
Yeah.
"Wow, what is she hearing at home?"
Mhm.
So again, that comes into the classroom. That
Sure.
plays into what you do and how you are with your students, because they're bringing baggage in
Oh, yeah.
that they may not believe in, but
Yes.
that's
Oh,
who they
yeah.
live with.
And you were able to dismiss many of those stereotypes that she heard at home, because
Yes.
she could go home and say, "My teacher's not like that." And then when he
Mhm.
met you, one of the reasons why he didn't say anything, because he felt like a fool when he got
Yes.
sat down and went, "Okay, he's got his stuff together, and she's teaching my daughter, and my daughter is happy, and my daughter's learning." And all parents want is for their children to be happy, safe, and learning. And if he could check those three boxes, he'd have to put that back in his pocket and use that for somebody else, because he couldn't use it with you.
Right, that's so true. So it was funny. There was another post on this other. I belong to all these Facebook groups. I need to get a life here. Um,
This is our way.
but somebody had, they were posting. There's been a lot of questions about um, folks having contact with Black people in a professional manner. So
Mhm.
one of the things I said, in addition to, thinking about when you had your first Black male or female teacher, when I was hired to go into school counseling in East Providence, I was the only Black school counselor at
Yes,
East Providence High School.
you were.
I retired from East Providence High School 12 years ago as a school counselor. There still is not and has not
No,
been a
has
Black
not
school
been one.
counselor
Has
since
not.
May.
Has not.
And where this is important, because, there's one role we have being classroom teachers and also having a presence outside of the classroom. As a school counselor, you have a lot of say over your students' schedule, making sure they're taking the right classes,
That's huge.
knowing whose personality they may clash with. So trying to fit them with the teacher that fits their learning style. And I
Absolutely.
remember so much students having conversations with me. I remember students having conversations with me because I was Black and I wasn't their school counselor. And
Absolutely.
and again, it was that cultural alignment. There were things that they knew that I had experienced, so they
Yeah.
felt comfortable coming to me. One example that really made me a little crazy. So we know that traditionally and historically, Black students are um, closed out of advanced placement classes for whatever reasons.
Yes.
There are multiple reasons. So I remember this young man was in an AP class, and I don't remember which one it was, but he was in an AP class and he was doing well. And I remember, I think it was in a guidance meeting, and his counselor said something about, because we were talking about changes we had made to schedules, and she said something about he had requested a different class and not to be an AP. And I remember saying, is he failing the AP class? And no, his mom sent in a note, said he wanted to be switched out. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a black male in an AP class that's doing really good. So, here I am. I go and track him down. I didn't want him to come into my office because I didn't want to start any stuff. But I went, tracked him down, and I said, so what's going on with you? And he said, Mrs. Wilkerson, when you're the only black one in a class and a question comes up about something black, they all turn to you and they want you to give the answer for all black people. He goes, I can't do that anymore. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm calling your mom.
That's right.
You're getting back in that class.
That's right. You ain't getting no.
I said, I said, if you were failing or struggling, that would be one thing. But you're getting, and I remember I called his mom and I said, look, and I explained who I was and stuff. I said, I'm not his counselor. So when you do talk to his counselor, you please do not use my name, because we need to have a working relationship here. And I said, but your son needs to be in that class. And I said, and there's still enough time to switch his schedule back. So please do that, which he did do.
Good.
And I was thrilled. But again, not knowing that he was feeling that is, again, a lack of cultural competency.
Yes.
Not knowing that that's a thing, because I had experienced the same thing, so I understood what he was feeling. So how do we change that narrative? Like, what do we do differently so that teachers that are, because like we said, right now, black and brown teachers still are, very small in numbers. So how do we help? Or what is it that white teachers need to be doing so that they can relate to their students, that they can have these conversations with them?
Well, I think white teachers need to just be honest. And if your heart is in the right place and you're honest, kids can read that. Kids can sift through BS in a heartbeat. They know who's real and they know who's not. And so if you're just honest, and here's the thing, they're going to have to do this. They're going to have to do this, right? Because we're all in the process now of doing bias training, and all these implicit bias and race books are selling like crazy. And it's wonderful. My question is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? So what you've got to do is you've got to bring what you learn and bring what's in your heart to the classroom, because the small number of black teachers is not going to get bigger, right? We had maybe 7 years ago, 2 social studies positions that were open. We had 400 applicants for each position.
Wow.
Not one minority, not one. We hired 2 fantastic women, social justice women. They're great. They become part of the social studies family, but no minority candidates, because no one's going into the profession. Very few minorities going into the profession. So because that's happening, white teachers are going to have to step up and look out for our kids just like they look out for everybody else's kids. And so sometimes those conversations might be difficult, but if your heart is in the right place and a kid knows that you're coming from a place of honesty, you can do that. You can do that, because you can't wait for us, because we're not riding around the corner anytime soon.
That's so true. That's so
We're
true.
really not.
So Jay said she had a similar experience in high school with with class changes and what have you.
And those classes is in and of itself important.
Yes.
I taught AP government for the last 6 years, and not many minorities, not many. And again, as freshmen, mostly, they did everything I asked them to do. It was wonderful to see the growth from when we met in late August until June, but there weren't that many minorities. And so even in middle school, we've got to be pushing kids who have that ability to take that chance and go. Right. And don't leave and don't panic because that's going to be the rest of your life, right? We're talking about our profession. I taught in the classroom 40 years, you taught in the classroom, and you still continue to teach at this level. And we're still one of a handful anywhere we go. So that's going to be there for the rest of your life. And if you let it beat you in high school, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
That's so true. So Jay responded saying that, you know, her son has said he's the only Black student in the education program at UNC Charlotte for the class of 2024.
It's sad.
That's it. That he's met so far. So
good for him.
That is sad.
And it's precious.
You know, and this continues on like at higher ed. So it was funny because some folks, when they responded to that question, a lot of times it wasn't until they were in college.
Oh, I know.
That they had a Black teacher. I know my 4 years in undergrad, I had one Black teacher, one Black male professor, and that was a history class. And I don't remember, not in my master's for school counseling, in my I don't know if I had anybody in my doctoral program. I may have had like guest speakers in my doctoral program, but not one of my professors or instructors was Black.
I had two in my master's. One taught non-Western Lit, tremendous, and one taught African resistance. Okay. And he was from Ghana, and he was tremendous. But other than that, really, I believe that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
And it's really interesting because, you know, like I continue teaching. So just recently, so I taught a class for Providence College this spring, and then this coming year, I'm actually going to be supervising the school counseling interns.
Oh,
and when I think about, so I actually worked at Providence College in their counselor ed department from when did I start there? 2008 was it? No, 2006 no, I can't even remember now. 2004 to 2010. So I worked there for 6 years and taught in their program. And other than me and like one other person, Renee Bailey, who was in Providence School Department, we were probably the only two faculty of color in the counselor ed department. Yeah. So this year in working with the students who are school counseling interns who will be going into schools with students of all colors, that's one of the things that I know that, you know, will, you know, because I get to shape the syllabus and shape the curriculum somewhat. I think it's important that they understand implicit bias and equity in education and all of the stuff that we're seeing now that we always knew was there anyway.
Absolutely. We might not
always knew,
but we knew it was there.
We knew it was there because we live it.
That's right.
Because we live it. But because they don't have to. So that's going to be one of my what I feel one of my responsibilities is to help point them in the right direction for resources and just to have them think about how they need to become more culturally competent, what that looks like, and what that means.
Yes. That's incredibly important because, again, like you said, they're going to be going out into schools and directing students toward a future. So if they don't understand those things, kids get lost in the shuffle. Counselor caseloads are enormous. Much respect. I don't even know how you guys do it with 200 and 300 students per counselor. It's unbelievable. But you're shaping, so I'm trying to shape minds. You're shaping futures. And so if a kid gets lost and doesn't have a parent at home who's been through the college application, just the college application process alone.
Yes.
A lot of kids can't meet deadlines. And so I knew a student who had a free ride set up to URI and couldn't hand in paperwork on time. Couldn't hand in paperwork because parents hadn't had the experience of deadlines, or maybe they were working, and so it was hard to connect. But that's what you counselors do, is to get students to think about their futures and guide them. And we need people who have, again, an honest heart to guide all students toward their potential.
Right. That's so true. So Jay again said that, you know, when her son was going to college and on Accepted Students Day, they purposely met with professors who were people of color. So somebody in the biology and English department, and he's kept in contact with them. So that's great because it's important to have, you know, mentors, and mentors can be, you know, mentors don't have to be the same race as you, but
Right.
it adds such a different experience. It's a
Absolutely.
whole different experience when you can be mentored by someone that understands, where you're trying to go because they've
Yeah.
been there and
Yes.
they understand the pitfalls and the obstacles.
And a lot of people don't want to mentor because they
Yeah.
hear the title mentor and they think, oh, it's a meeting. No, it's casual conversations after school.
Right.
I had one student come back and visit me literally for 15 years.
Mhm.
He would come in maybe once a month for like 15 years. I've had other students who have come in after school, and sometimes you've had a long day and so here's my guy would come in and visit. We'd talk about comic books. I got Black Panther on the back wall there. We
Yes.
talked about comics. I had him on my wall in class. And I'd say, and this was good for me because
Right.
it allowed me to kind of end my day with a smile. And it was nice for him because we still had that connection. And it's just amazing. So mentor is just somebody, like you said, who looks out for somebody and says, well, here was my experience. Maybe you can learn from me and maybe don't make some of the same mistakes that I made.
Exactly.
And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is so you won't make the mistakes that I made.
Yes, that is so true. Like I said, I feel like I'm so fortunate that I've been able to stay in touch with students that I had. Some of my kids, I had them as seventh graders. And then when I went to the high school and eventually became a school counselor, then sometimes I was their school counselor. And
Exactly.
that was like, and to see who they've become from ages, from the age of 12 to adults now with their, with their own marriages and their own kids is absolutely fantastic, to see some of them that have gone into education
Yes.
and the differences that they're making is amazing. And to see that they're carrying on that same mentoring spirit,
Yes.
and then, and sometimes the student will say something to you and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that. I'll never forget one time, I was no longer at Martin.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the high school and I was actually at that time, I think I was on the school improvement team. And I remember I was there sometime in the afternoon because no, actually maybe I had gone to PC already, but I was still on the school improvement team and I was there waiting for a meeting. And this young lady walks up to me and she said, "You don't remember me, but you had me. Remember we had the repeat period at Martin?"
Yeah. Yes.
So she said, "You had me for repeat period." And she said, I was awful. She said, "I had made up my mind that as soon as I was old enough, I was going to quit school."
Yeah.
She said, "But you treated me with such respect. And I watched how you got up in front of the classroom and how you just made everyone feel good and you loved what you were doing." And she said, "I made up my mind then and there that I wasn't going to quit school." And she goes, "And I loved when we had you for repeat period." Because she goes, "Sometimes you were the only thing about my school day that was good." And I
Exactly.
remember sitting there saying, oh my God, because you don't know when you're influencing somebody. You don't know how you're making somebody feel. So for her to come back years later and tell me this, I mean, that was priceless. That was my pay.
And you can't get that in any other gig.
No, you
This
can't.
this woman who used to teach art at our school, I had her. She was brand new to the school, and it was just getting ready for lunch break. And I said to this other young woman, and she told me this because I forgot. Would you please make sure that she goes to lunch and doesn't sit by herself? And yes. And then she told me later on that they became friends for life. And so when you treat people with honesty, like I still collect comics, and so another guy, he was from Riverside. He had moved to Martin, and it was during some kind of a study or something. He was reading a Batman. I think it was a Batman comic, and I said, "Oh, Batman." He said, "You collect comics?" I said, "Oh yeah, I collect Daredevil." And we started talking about comics, and it immediately put him at ease. I saw him maybe 20 years later at the comic book store. He relayed that story to me, and I was like, "Oh my God." Because you just are nice to people. But
Right.
that's the kind of lasting effect that you have. And you heard me say this earlier. You can't get that selling tires. You can't get that working at Walmart. You can only get that being a teacher, because Radio Gaga, right next to Radio Gaga, is your voice and my voice. Whatever their favorite song is, we're right next to it.
Yes.
Right next to it. It's
Yes.
fascinating. It just,
Yes.
that's our pay. That's our pay.
It is. It is.
We live forever.
It is. So one of the things I always do, Richard, before I wrap up, is I always like to introduce a book because that's my thing. Got to read. Um, so there's so this book. This is actually excuse me. This is actually the second time I'm reading this book because it's a newer edition, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you've read it. Why are all the Black kids sitting in the cafeteria and other conversations about race? This
Ooh.
is by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. Originally came out, I want to say in 96 or 97,
Mhm.
and she updated it, I want to say 2017. So
Okay.
I would definitely recommend that people, if you're looking for a book to read that will help you relate to students by learning more about the culture and the issues of systemic racism and how it affects education. This is a great book for you to get. You can also, get it from your local library. I'm a big proponent of using your libraries, even though your libraries aren't open physically, they're doing curbside deliveries. I know we're doing that here in Cumberland County. So
Yes.
please, folks, make sure you do that. So, Richard, any last words or advice that you'd want to give to someone who was thinking about a career in teaching?
Yes, if you're thinking about a career in teaching, I would say go for it. And the reason why I would say go for it is because the impact that you have on students is incalculable. We stay with them forever, and it's incredibly rewarding. It's incredibly rewarding. I can't think of anything else that I'd rather do or could do than teaching. Um, I'm paraphrasing Bohemian Rhapsody. What that's what I do when Freddie is talking to Mary and he's saying, "When I have them in the palm, when I have them in my hand and it's all working, I'm the person I was born to be," and that's me. I was born to teach. What am I going to sell used cars, sell suits? This is what I was born to do. And so it's incredibly rewarding. It's the hardest gig in the world, bar
Mhm.
none, but it is so rewarding that I would say do it. I would say absolutely do it. But it's hard, but I
Yeah.
would say do it. I would say
Oh,
do it.
I agree with you so much on that. I remember going, I remember that, the first week and when I actually became a real teacher, it wasn't student teaching, it wasn't practicum, it was this is my classroom and I'm in charge of it.
Working without a net.
It took me, I remember that by November of that first year, because I remember Bill Flanagan and I started at the same time, and Lynn Rakitansky was on our team. And who else did I start with that year? Oh my God, there were a bunch of us. But I
Mhm.
remember saying to Billy by November, I said, I can't do this, Billy.
Yes.
This is too hard. I'm
Yes.
going to finish out this year and then I'm going to quit. I
I
can't
can't
do
do it.
this. I
Yes.
can't do this.
Yes.
This is too much work. How do
Ridiculous.
how do you do this? But I remember sticking it out and, next thing you know, it's 5 years, it's 10
Yeah.
years, it's
Yeah.
15 years, and then one day you're retiring and you're like, "Oh my God." And then I retire from one educational environment and just go into another because, like you
Absolutely.
said, it's in your DNA.
Yes.
How do
Yes.
you not teach? Sometimes I would say something to my husband, he goes, "Oh, you've got that teacher's voice on."
Yes. Yeah. Especially when there's like an argument. Like, I'm not a student. I'm not a
Yes,
student, so sometimes I have to remember. Okay, wait a minute. Now I'm not in the classroom. I'm talking
yes,
to the missus. But
exactly.
but it's really really important to understand that that first year, if you change subjects, that year happens again.
Yes,
So every time you change subjects, it's the hardest year of your life.
it is, it
Once you
is.
do it, it gets easier. And now today, when you can go on the internet and find resources, remember we had to build our own resources.
Oh my God,
We had
yes,
to
we
type
did.
everything. We had to write things by hand. Uh,
Yes,
the ditto machines. Today, you go to PBS, they got a video clip. Here's the questions. Here's the 2-column notes. All you got to do is just fill in
yes,
the flesh. But we didn't have that, so
no,
it was really hard to do and balancing all these things. But it's well worth it. It's well worth it.
it is. And Jay commented by saying she's going to
That's
make sure that her son hears this. So Jay, thank you so much
Thank
because
you. Thank you, Jen.
it's really important that students understand that this is, you know, you have to love kids to be a teacher
Oh yeah, and
because people
we
aren't.
knew people who did not like kids who thought, and I don't know how you do that. How do you not like kids and teach? That's
Oh, I know.
I don't understand that.
I know. I was having a conversation with someone the other day and I said, people don't keep their best kids at home. We get everybody.
We're all God's children.
Yes, we do. And you just have to understand, I mean, my philosophy was always that I needed to treat my students the way I wanted someone to treat my own kids.
Yes, 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 yes. And if I could say one more thing, the thing about teaching also is that it keeps you young.
Yes.
It keeps you young because you're listening to new words that they use or new songs or new music or new whatever it is, but it keeps you young. And that's what I found. It kept me young. I never thought about how old I was until I see my age in print and I go, ooh. But it keeps you young. It really does. And so I have teaching for that to thank, because teaching has given me everything that I have, except the missus and my children. It's given me everything that I've had.
Yep. And as Sherry said, it's a work of heart. It really is.
That is fantastic.
It really is.
That is fantastic.
So I thank everyone for joining in this evening. Please make sure that you like this and that you share it out with people. Within 24 to 36 hours, I'll also be uploading this on my YouTube channel. So please look at it there and share it out. Richard, thank you so much. This was like so cool for me because, like I said, I've been a fan of yours since day one. And to be able to co-host this with you is absolutely fabulous. And you know, so all our former students, make sure you watch this and send us out some love, because some of you had me and some of you had Mr. Martin. So make sure you let us know that you've watched this and that you've passed it along also.
My hair's a little shorter and the goatee's a little grayer, but I'm still me inside.
Yes, a lot of gray up here, a lot of gray up here. So, folks, make sure you stay tuned next week for another College Conversations. I'm not sure if I'm going to have a guest or not yet. I know I will have a guest the following week, a young lady that I had the opportunity to work with who has been promoting a free pre-health conference that is being put on by some Penn State students, and I wanted her to come on and talk about that. So if you have a student that's interested in a career in medicine, pre-health, please make sure you tune in 2 weeks so you can hear Magda talk about that. I'll be putting that event up soon. And everyone, again, thank you so much for joining in. Thank you for listening, and thank you for taking this and liking it and sharing it and expanding our audience, because we really do believe, you can hear the passion and the dedication in our voices. Teaching is a work of the heart. And thank you, Sherry, for saying that. And again, Richard, thank you so much. And Richard, I'm going to end this broadcast, but I want you to stay on.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good night.
So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next Monday.